Got a commission to cast this portrait bust. It's a loving grandfather. His name was Russ, and I mean no disrespect, but I'm from heavy construction background, and everybody gets a nickname. So Russ is, for this video anyway, Russ is Cigar Man. It's water-based clay. I'm not used to working with that. It's very soft. It was kind of intimidating. I was scared something would happen to it. So we worked some long hours to go ahead and get the mold done as soon as possible before something bad happened, although nothing bad happened. But we used urethane rubber, plastic paste for the mother mold, and I used playing cards for separators. They worked really well in this soft water-based clay. They don't work too good, and Debbie usually uses the oil-based clay, and it's too stiff. We made a three-piece mold, front and back and the top, and no problem with the mold, except that it sat for a few days crooked, so the mold warped, but it was easy to straighten the wax after the mold was done. I'm not the best mold maker, but this one came out pretty good. Started with the back of the head, used playing cards as a separator. They're stapled and taped together. There is acorn nuts glued around the perimeter to the cards as keys, and this would have been easier if I'd have been able to lay it on its face, but it's too soft, so we just applied the rubber vertically, and we got some sufficient thickness, and then it was time for the mother mold. In order to make the wax removal easier, I made the mother mold two pieces in the back. I just cut a plywood dividing wall, fitted it as best I could, and sealed it with clay, and then did the plaster paste on one side. We usually use plaster, but this thing was going to be so heavy that we went with the plastic. And then at night, of course, you have to cover the thing up because it's water-based and it'll dry out. So after the first side was cured, then we could do the other half of the back. Make sure we seal the edges with something so that the plastic won't stick to each other. And the other side was pretty straightforward. No big deal. Got it done. After the fact, you drill holes through the two sides, and you can bolt them together for when you're pouring the wax to keep them together. You don't have to use clamps or anything. You can use bolts. With the back mold complete, I can now lay it on the back of its head without worrying about squashing the clay. And the front turned out to be is easier now because gravity's helping you. We popped all these acorn nuts out, and that left some nice little keyways. Did our rubber in one piece, the whole front and the top of the head. With the mother mold, again, I broke it up along the rim of that hat. So the top of the head is a separate mother mold than the front of the head, but the rubber goes continuous all the way across. This is the little dam I made to facilitate breaking up the mother mold. Again, we use plaster paste just to save weight. So poured the wax, chased it. The artist Michelle came and checked it out and did some touch up, and then I cut the top of the head off and sprued it and got it ready for dipping. And unfortunately, I have absolutely no photographs of the entire process. Sorry. Hindsight is wonderful, and you learn from hindsight. In this case, I would have done two things differently. One, the feeder tubes that are up near the collar, they should have run to the pour cup. This would have made the whole structure a lot stronger, because when you start dipping this thing, it gets really heavy, and it's kind of scary. Second thing I would have done differently is when I cut the top of the head off, I would have included the back of the head and maybe part of the shoulders. This thing got so heavy that I could just barely pick it up, and it would have been nicer if it was the weight was divided up more 50-50. After we got this thing with a shell thick enough and dipped it a couple more times for insurance, I started the burnout. I always burn out the cup and the hook with the torch off to the side like this, but this time I thought I would just burn out the whole thing, so I kept the torch on it for a long time, and I thought I had all the wax out of it, but I was wrong, because you can tell when you put it in the furnace and flames come out the top, then there's still wax in the inside. The wax burns out quickly and the molds are left in the furnace and brought up to about 1800 degrees. The bronze is brought up to 2100 degrees and poured, and looks like we had a good pour. The cups are clean, there's no splatter, there's no black soot. This is a real good sign. So as soon as they cool down a little bit, or usually before that, we start breaking the shell off, because you don't know what you get until you break it off. But Cigar Man looked really good. His hat looked really good. It was a good pour. So the hard work of removing all the sprues is next. So what you're watching here is the condensed version of about 3 hours of pretty hard, nasty work. I use the majority of the time the porta bandsaw, which you see here, and the little grinder with the cutoff blade, both of which are noisy and makes a lot of dust, and it's just not pleasant work, but it needs to be done. On this particular pour, I couldn't get inside the head with the sawzall, with either of these two, so I used the sawzall, which is like the least desirable tool to do that with, but it was the only way I could figure out how to get the vents cut from the inside. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that if I were to do it again, I would put more of the wax on the top of the head and remove some from the main part of the head, kind of even up the sizes. That would have made this a lot easier, because it would have opened up the back of the head, and I wouldn't have had to spend quite as much time cutting and grinding. But there's kind of a catch-22 involved here. The ceramic shell sticks tenaciously to all the little cracks and crevices, and we bead blast to get them out, but you can't bead blast efficiently until all the sprues are out of the way. With the grinder running, there's always the white dust in the air in addition to the bronze dust, so I make sure there's a fan blowing the stuff away from me. With the porta band, it's the problem is that the white ceramic shell has sand in it, so it eats up the porta band blades, and they are not inexpensive. Big boy foundries have a machine where you just clamp the bronze in, and it shakes them so violently that all of the ceramic shell comes out. I can only dream about that. So the process is just keep sawing away, grinding away, get the big pieces out the way, and then you can get other tools in to get the little pieces out the way. And as all this stuff is removed, I try to grind flush any evidence of the sprues. Not that they'll be perfect on the interior of it, but you want it to look semi-professional. And then it's off to the blast cabinet to remove whatever ceramic shell is left after all the grinding and sawing is complete. All the bits and pieces of bronze that I've cut out will be remelted next pour. It won't be wasted, and all the ceramic shell material will become expensive driveway fill. So Cigar Man is now in the blasting cabinet, which is just a little sandblasting machine. It's a compressed air with I use aluminum oxide. It's a gentle abrasive, so we don't really remove any of the bronze. We're just cleaning it. We're getting the black surface off of it and little pieces of investment out of the cracks. The machine is kind of neat. It vacuums away the dust so you can see what's going on, and then it recycles the abrasive. We use the abrasive over and over again until it breaks down into dust. Now you can see here that I've already welded the top of the head on. This is something else I don't have a video of, but it came out pretty well. So we're getting him all cleaned up so we can see what we need to do, and then we'll move him back to the workbench. He will need some chiseling, because there's little pieces of bronze that have flowed into cracks in the mold that are not supposed to be there, and the whole entire surface is a little bit rough to the feel. It's just the bronze runs into the porosity of the mold, so that requires sanding. And for the non-critical surfaces, I use flat disc 120 grit on the grinder. This is an art unto itself, because this will remove bronze if you're not careful. But I use a real light touch, and just trying to get the the metal to be pretty. I don't want to change the texture. I don't want to change the shape. And I wouldn't use this on like a face or an ear or something like that. Then I switched to this little air grinder, and I've down to 220 grit, and there's also Scotch-Brite pads that I put in this thing. I'm just trying to get him to feel good, and I'm trying to get the bronze pretty, and there's always little bumps and stuff that need to be removed. So this is what the chasing process is all about: chiseling, sanding, buffing, chiseling, sanding, buffing. Occasionally welding back a defect. I had one little hole in the top that I welded back, and so the metal work is finished. He's finished. I drilled and tapped the base and mounted him to a temporary board, and I blackened the inside a little bit because I don't like seeing the shiny on the backside. And then Michael, someone with much more experience than us, came and did the patina with the artist Michelle. Was there also, and it came out well. Michael has 20 years experience in this, and I don't, so he probably did a much better job than we would have done. The patina took about 3 hours. I need to learn from Michael on how to be patient with stuff like this. But after the patina was done and the hot wax was applied, Michelle took the bronze to a cabinet maker friend, and he put it on a pretty base, and it was wrapped, and it's a surprise Christmas present to some lucky person. Her grandfather Russ, as I understand it. I hope I have that right. And it's been an interesting adventure, and Michelle is happy, and we're happy, and Michael's happy. So it doesn't get much better than that.